try to make this research-based but also clinical-based, and my wife always tells me I'm a little bit slow because I had to do a PhD and a postdoc before I decided I didn't want to be an academic. I'm actually happier in the clinic, but I'm able to try to merge the clinical data and the research data together to hopefully give us a more complete picture. And yes, I do make a point of trying wherever possible to publish in ophthalmology journals because it's, quite frankly, how do I say this without sounding rude, it's hard for them to argue with themselves, right? So I like to show that slide because a lot of people think when they look at that, they kind of say, geez, is this guy trying to compensate for something? Yes. So I was told I'd be lucky to finish school twice, not once, twice. I was actually in a motor vehicle accident with my dad when I was 8, and I was knocked out of commission for 3 years. So I was nonverbal for a year, pretty much had an MPC of about 50 centimeters, would turn my head to read, use my nose to block one eye. So I was pretty much like that for 3 years. Has anybody ever seen the movie The King's Speech? That was pretty much my life for 3 years. I shut down verbally for a year, and it was really quite, it was a bit emotional for me when I watched that movie. I went there with my wife because I really wanted to see it, and halfway through the movie, you know when they put the headphones on and you can speak a lot better, I described that to her several times in my youth before we saw the movie, so she knew, you know, this is not the movie telling you this, you told me this dozens of times about when I went through speech path. So I do have a healthy respect for PT and OT and speech path, but for me, one of the turning events was when I had my visual system taken care of. So for me, going to optometry school was a calling, and I was a little bit ticked when I went through optometry school and didn't quite get a lot of VT during optometry school. I really felt shortchanged. So that's why I went on and did my piled high and deep, went and did my PhD. And John Flanagan at the University of Waterloo, I decided to take on the PhD because it was on psychophysics, which sounds really boring, but I wanted to learn about how the brain worked. So when I say my doctorate, my postdoc was on psychophysics, it sounds boring, but when I say it was on illusions, it sounds cool. So I did it on illusions. So the Heidelberg edge perimeter, which I gather Charles Shadowski actually uses, I was glad to hear somebody's using it. It is based on the phantom contour illusion, which is primarily a dorsally generated stimulus. You can't see it when it's chromatic. It gets more obvious as you move into the periphery. So we used it as a glaucoma test, and we combined it with the HRT to have a structure-function map. So that was my PhD thesis, but my thesis was to learn about the brain. My whole premise was to learn about how does the brain process visual information, and if there's a reward for the glaucoma world, great, but my premise was always about visual function. So we've got 2 clinics in Ontario, one's in Guelph and one's in Toronto. And it's View Cubed Vision Therapy is the name of our clinical network. And I would not be, I trained in the UK, but I'm not British. I always like to make that clear. I'm Irish. If you ever meet an Irishman, they'll always make that distinction, right? W.B. Yeats has always said, education is not the filling of a pill, but the lighting of a fire. So it's about inspiring independence in education. So I know we're here to talk about concussion, but my original love of VT started in dealing with kids with learning issues, which I think is where a lot of us start in VT. And of course, no group would be cool without a vision statement and a mission statement, so there it is. It is empowering people and unlocking human potential. You notice nowhere in there do I say, by vision, yet. Because the vision statement is your grand goal that will never be achieved, because you'll always keep on chasing it, right? The mission statement is how you get there. So to embrace and drive change through the passionate application of clinical research using optometric neurovisual rehabilitation to remove the stigma of failure by enhancing natural curiosity. That's a mouthful. I never thought I would see the word clinical research and passionate in the same sentence. But I've learned to marry the two, and now because I'm in clinic, most of the time I'm using my clinical data to drive my research, and I'm actually having a lot of fun doing it. And that's the reason why we do what we do. Now, I did do a year in the military after I finished high school, and one thing that they teach you in the military is it's all about teamwork. So nobody's getting over that wall until the team learns to work together. And whenever I see this clip, I always think to myself, you know what? The last patient getting over that wall is the patient. Sorry, the last person getting over that wall is the patient. So if everybody prior doesn't do their job properly, the patient doesn't get to their MRP, or maximum rehabilitative potential. So that guy at the very end, I am the patient, right? So we all have to do our job in the right sequence, the right therapy in the right sequence. So every therapy that's involved in TBIs is important. But the critical question is, what's the sequence? What's the right sequence? And I'm not standing here going to give you the answer, but I'm going to share a lot of the experiences I've had so far working with the University of Toronto, working with sports medicine, working with an American Institute of Balance board certified audiologist, working with Larry Comer, who's a hormone-based doc for post-concussion. All these people have added to my knowledge about this area, and I didn't really feel like I was getting a handle on concussion until I got out of my silo, right? Because we all have our silos. And this is probably the biggest issue in concussion right now. You know, everybody says, well, it's my area. It's like, well, no, it's vestibular is involved, vision is involved, hormones are involved. How do we know it's not a vestibulopathy, right? There's all these different types of questions that we have to answer. And I don't know if John Flanagan was trying to scare me here or what, but on day one of my PhD, he's like, here's the visual system, Pat. This is what you got to learn about. And acuity is one slice of your vision down here, maybe, kind of, sort of, right? 40% of the human brain is visual machinery, at least. And everyone always says, where's your quote for that? Here it is. Fellman and Van Essen, it's a 1991 paper. 40% of the primate brain is primarily visual machinery, and that's probably an underestimation. Now, to put that in context, we've got 1.2 million ganglion cells per optic nerve, approximately. How many ganglion cells do we have per ear? Anybody know? 30,000. 30,000. And they're not bigger or smaller, they're roughly the same diameter. So you look at the anatomy and it's really telling us vision is one of the more dominant systems that we have. It's not the only system, but it's one of the more dominant ones for sure.